This video is made possible by Second Call Defense. Second Call Defense provides immediate, upfront legal protection for a member who is forced to use any legal weapon for self-defense. So protect yourself today with Second Call Defense. I did. You'll find the link in the description. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I'm super grateful. There is going to be either I've already posted it or I'm about to post it, a video that is going to inform you about something you need to know, and it's probably going to be entitled, They're Out to Get You. Well, they are, and watch the video and you'll know more. I don't want to bore you to tears with it right here. I want to get to the interview with Rick Travis and talk about what's happening in California nationally and some important information you need to know about hunting. And we'll cover all of that in the interview. Keep in mind that we do have these other places in case YouTube is a problem for you, or if they shut down a video or something, you can check it out on Rumble or BitChute or one of these other places. And then also you should check out the GunGuyTV Firearms podcast. We've completely revamped the way we're doing it, and we are consistently now doing it twice a month. You'll find it on your favorite podcast player. You will also find the video version on the podcast channel on Rumble. It's a separate channel. You'll find a link in the description where you can check out the video version of the GunGuyTV Firearms podcast. All right, let's go talk to Rick. Rick, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm super glad that you are doing so, because just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, the old Jaws thing, we're back in the midst of it again. So, all right, give us the update. What the heck is going on in California?
Well, it's like you said. I mean, we've got multiple issues. Over the weekend, there's a national issue that came into play, and that has to do with credit cards. A lot of times, especially during COVID, we realized that trying to use cash wasn't an easy thing to do because there were coin shortages and things like that. So a lot of the places we shopped at for a variety of products said, hey, could you please use your credit card? Some people are like, well, I don't use a credit card. It doesn't matter if you use an ATM card. Those are ran through systems such as Visa, MasterCard, etc., to be able to work. And so during that process, everybody's always concerned how much government knows. And obviously, all sorts of different things are tracked about our purchases, but they're tracked in a more generic way. And what has happened is we had several people through every town and some politicians, such as like Elizabeth Warren, our own Attorney General, Rob Bonta, who was still ticked off at what happened at the end of the legislature this year, went to MasterCard, went to American Express, and went to Visa and said, hey, can you catalog for us with a special code every time someone purchases firearms and firearms-related items? And what Everytown USA used, and this was a really interesting thing, they said, hey, we're just trying to find out, like when you buy airline tickets and everything, what your common sense purchases are, and also to prevent, by knowing when someone's building up for an insurrection or building up to do something heinous. So they try to use these wonderful terms, Joel, into the public's eye to go, well, what's wrong with that? And I've already been doing this today. I gave the example, I helped coach baseball for a while. I never went to all the parents and said, hey, could you bring me 3.5 baseballs, knowing what we were going to need for the season. Instead, out of the fees, I went to Chick Sporting Goods and I bought literally 300 baseballs for the season, for the league.
There's nothing wrong with somebody wanting to have 1,000 rounds or 10,000 rounds or 50,000 rounds of ammunition. Lots of normal, law-abiding citizens do. And right. Sometimes they do that because they're kind of prepper mindset or whatever, or sometimes they do it just because they shoot a lot. So the idea that this is somehow, you're a loon if you buy a lot of ammunition, I find totally out of whack, because it's not true. And secondly, it's kind of offensive. So, but it's not surprising that these anti-gun organizations would go down that road.
Right. And one of the issues that I've been bringing up is, in my personal beliefs, I think this is yet another mode of them trying to find out who has what, because there are a lot of firearms, such as long guns, that were not registered prior to the mandatory registration here in California when you purchase a new one. Not that you had to go back with the other ones. And what I find problematic is whenever you expand anything to the bureaucracy of government, you put in the hands of often people who feel they're underpaid, underappreciated, highly subjective, and have a lot of opinions about a lot of things. And they sometimes abuse that power. And one example could be, I have a family member who has nothing wrong with the Second Amendment. They just don't participate in that right. They're not against it. And I say that because they have no problems buying presents for people. So, all of a sudden that individual buys me for Christmas 2 rifle slings and a couple of bipods for my hunting rifles. Well, that could cause a bureaucrat to go, oh, they have hidden firearms. This individual has hidden firearms. That's where they're at. No, they're buying it for somebody else. There's nothing wrong with buying a present for somebody else. But this is how all of a sudden that person could be flagged as someone that didn't register something, didn't do something properly. It's all these little things that can be misused and misaligned. And my question would be, there are a lot of things that could be misused and misappropriated against people for criminal activities that aren't being tracked. So, like I've said before, I would like to know what has elevated this subject matter to this level of like, dang, Joel, if we would have had that visa transaction back on this date, we could have prevented X. Because I don't think you're going to find it. Because criminals are not showing up at the back of ammo trucks and alleyways going, can I charge? They're just not doing it.
So I did a little video today for the supporters that I have on GunGuyTV crew, for all my GunGuyTV crew members, and I talked about the whole idea of tracing guns, and the fact that the gun traces that the ATF do, and I know this from Dan O'Kelly having said so on my show a dozen times if he said it once, that the tracing information is not really for solving crimes, because in his 30 years in ATF, he couldn't come up with one example of a trace actually solving crime. It's something that ATF uses to go get money. They sort of schmooze Congress and fool Congress with it, saying it's super important, and they got to make more of these traces, so they need more money. It's a budget acquisition tool, but it really doesn't track anything or trace anything. The other thing is the whole idea of and I would lump this sort of in the same bucket. The other idea is the whole idea of the ghost gun, which was started here in California. It's a nonsensical term that doesn't mean anything. It's kind of like assault weapon. It's a made-up political term. But it refers to a gun that cannot be traced. Well, yeah, guns that cannot be traced have been around since long before I was born. They're called guns that were stolen where the serial number has been ground off of them. And I have checked, the majority of guns that are seized by law enforcement that cannot be traced are guns with the serial number ground off of them. They are not homemade guns made from 80% lowers or kits or whatever. But the lie is that is the case for the purpose of keeping law-abiding citizens from making a gun at home, something they've done since before the founding of this country. And so I asked myself, okay, well, if they lie about the tracing, okay, well, we got to have this information, because if you don't trace it, if you can't trace it, they can't trace it, that's going to keep them from solving crimes. Well, we know for a fact, because, again, I've had Dan O'Kelly, who spent 30-some-odd years at ATF, telling me that actually is not true, and they don't use traces to solve crimes. Oftentimes, the trace request comes in after the crime has been solved. They just want to know where the gun came from. And then it only takes you basically to the first owner, because it may have been given away, sold, whatever. It never takes you hardly ever to the person who owns it currently, or the iterations of sales, private sales along the way. They don't know. Or maybe it was stolen. Who knows? If that's a lie, which it is, used for whatever purpose, and the whole issue of ghost guns is a lie, when we find out that actually the ones, it's not really these homemade guns that are the issue. It's the fact that criminals don't buy guns, they steal them, and then in many cases they grind the serial number off. If that's a lie, then the reason for wanting to track every purchase a gun owner makes in purchasing gun or equipment or ammunition, and figure that out if they use a credit card, so they know when did you buy what and who bought what, is not just for marketing purposes. That's a lie. So if we understand those are all lies on the part of the gun banners, because they are, then why? What do you think? Why? Why are they wanting to do this? See, I just set you up with a softball. Aren't you so happy I did this for you? Go ahead.
Yeah, and the simple answer is this is going after what Newsom has said, to kill the culture of gun ownership, because they're trying to remove yet another reason why people don't want to go purchase a firearm. You know, when you look at additional taxes, additional paperwork, narrowing it down to where you can go. I mean, just in the last 10 years, the number of places I could go locally to purchase a firearm has been severely narrowed down, because you've got the big box stores that used to have them, don't have them anymore. You've got a lot of the little mom and pop shops, thanks to COVID restrictions and other things, went out of business. So they're not there. A lot of people are fed up with California's, you know, law after law, rule after rule, step after step, fine after fine for FFLs, being the dealers. And this is just one more step that, you know, it makes no sense. You hear a lot of people that have moved into this space called the Second Amendment community that have been like, this is unbelievable how hard and how draconian it is here in the state. And this is in a state that, you know, like I'll say in a few minutes, is already plagued by other, what I would call real issues that need to be dealt with. But it's hard to deal with those and keep a good attitude dealing with them when you're constantly being like through incremental bites of what you like. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to make this so people are like, there's too many other things I can go do with my life. I'm just done dealing with this. And that's why I call this the passive aggressive removal of the gun industry and the gun owning population.
And it sounds like I should put on my tinfoil hat when I say that part of this is wanting to know who has guns and who has what, so that those things can more easily be confiscated. And people will say, yeah, but that'll never happen. But we also said, well, yeah, but the government will never shut down people and tell them they can't leave their house, or that they can't go to church, or that they can't walk their dog, or that they can't have more than X number of people in a building at a time, or that they can't get closer than to each other than 6 feet.
Or they can't meet for the holidays with their families.
Or you can't visit your loved one who's sick and dying in the hospital. Or if you're a husband, you can't be in there with your wife when she's having a baby. Yeah. We never thought the government would enforce any of those things, because we thought in the United States, we're free citizens and we have rights. And yet we just lived through all of that. And we found out from COVID revealed, I think, and peeled the veil off just how draconian and how oppressive our government is willing to be. And sure, you can say, well, that's because it was a dangerous disease. Okay, well, we now know that the masks don't work, that the vaccines didn't work, and so on. And yes, was it a dangerous disease? Of course. I have friends, including you, who were very, very, very sick with it. But nevertheless, did that justify the level of control that the government put on the citizens of this country, and then continued to do so long after the control was necessary? So when we realize, I think if we take an honest look at it, if we really, really take an honest look at it, we're honest with ourselves, then we have to realize that the idea that this will never happen in the United States, that's been proven very, very wrong. And there's no, first of all, I mean, I just explained, there's no governmental interest, no legitimate governmental interest in being able to trace firearms to solve crimes, because we know, because again, Dan O'Kelly was there for 30 years, and he's told me a number of times that he cannot remember a single instance in which a firearms trace request at ATF actually resulted in the solving of a crime because they traced a gun, or even contributed to the solving of a crime. So we know that that's not the case. Then why do they want to do it? They want to do it because they want to know where the guns are, because if they know where they are, they're easier to take away. And there are many ways for them to try to do that, but in some states, in California, I mean, you know, they get you, they know when you inhale, when you exhale. But the middle of the country, the majority of the states, they don't know who owns what, because the states, many of them don't have a registration, most of them. They do an instant background check, you take the gun out the door you go, and that's the end of it. So how does the federal government figure out who has what?
Well, and I think part of this comes back to, when you're talking about lies, the head of Moms that Demand Action, her quote, I'm looking at, so I say it right, is these new merchant codes will help banks and financial institutes track suspicious and potentially illegal gun purchases. This is how we will protect people from gun violence. Okay, again, there's a huge assumption that when the cartel goes to buy guns for illegal activities, they're going to swipe a credit card, which I think is absolutely erroneous. Like, that's never going to happen. You've never seen the cartel, even in a movie. Hollywood, who doesn't get 90% of reality, even looks at you and doesn't show like, hey, Joel, the American Express Platinum card. No, they're opening up a duffel bag full of money.
And they're not buying the guns at the gun shop, okay? Right. They're buying the guns from the illegal cart. It's like a drug deal. The two cars back up to each other, the money goes here and the guns go there. Jeez. How many times does Al Pacino or actors like that have to do this in the movies that way for us to figure out that this doesn't happen, at a gun store? It happens in the dead of night or in some secret
or
place.
Nick Cage when he was doing that illegal arms trade in one of his movies.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's closer to reality than what we're talking about here. But at the same time, I mean, the honest law-abiding citizen, there's no reason why an honest law-abiding citizen shouldn't be able to go down to the gun store and buy 3 guns on the same day.
Right. And so this is where, I keep trying to sound the alarm, because it's not just this encroachment on guns, but it's like, how much does the government really need to know? What's next? How
do we go about, is there a way to fight that other than just pay cash for everything? I don't know. How do we do it?
And that's something that we're examining right now. We have our legal team on this. We've had lots of phone calls and emails, of course, as this broke over the weekend. And we're working on that to get down to what we can do possibly legislatively. But this is definitely a targeted, out-of-the-box attack. It's been released in several parts of the country on a national level, and we're starting to see a lot more of that. And that's one of the reasons that, when you and I talked earlier today, I wanted to come on and talk about this. We're also seeing some of the laws that were attempted here in California now trying to be attempted in the federal level. So, when we make the comment, I've heard you make it, I've made it, as it goes in California, so does it go nationwide. Unfortunately, we were right, because we've got, multiple examples that are emerging.
That shows that, we're not looking for pats on the back about it. But we did predict
I would love to be wrong on that.
Yeah, me too. I'd love to have been wrong on that, but we aren't.
Yeah. And then, and coupled with all that is then we have some really real issues. And, if you don't mind, I'd like to go to one of those real issues that I was dealing with today with the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
What do you want to address?
Yeah. So I know some of your listeners are involved in the sport of hunting and putting food on their table. And some of them stay here in California. Some of them go out of state to bring the food back in. And we've been dealing with a subject for better part of a decade called chronic wasting disease, or CWD, as it's often referred to as, which is a disease that's caused by a protein called a prion that causes the animal to waste away. It's similar in nature to what the British dealt with mad cow disease. So obviously you don't want to consume the meat and products of those animals as a human, because we want to keep that out of the human food chain. California has been fortunate that we have not had any confirmed cases of CWD to date, but got to spend a considerable amount of time this afternoon with members of the Department of Fish and Game and the Fish and Game Commission, and looking at how we stave that off as long as possible. And I want to be really clear, all of us, the different stakeholders from California deer and national wild turkey and Rocky Mountain elk and others that were on that call, we're all in agreement that the genie is out of the bottle, and eventually it's going to land here in California. Maybe next year, maybe 10 years from now, but it is coming. And so it's like how to minimize that risk, how to keep it away from here as long as possible. And some of the things that I would share with you in more of an educational format, Joel, it was interesting to see that when 13% of the population gets CWD, you start to see upwards of a 40% decline in the entire population of wildlife that has them,
Wow.
which is a huge number when you hit that area.
Yeah.
When you look at some of the charts, and we could talk about this more in depth on a different show focusing on this, but when you look at some of the charts from where they were in 2006 versus 2022, it's exploded throughout North America. It is just amazing. And the challenge is it's human intervention. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is I'm sure there's probably, I'm just going to guess, at least 2/3 of your people don't hunt, have no desire to hunt. That's cool. So there's a term that we use in the community called consumptive versus non-consumptive. So today, when you hiked, you were hiking as a non-consumptive person. You're not consuming the environment. Me, if I went hiking that same area to hunt or fish, I'd be consumptive. I'm bringing something out of the environment back home to consume. So it's a pretty easy term to understand. It is actually the non-consumptives that are the biggest threat to spreading CWD. I actually started off when I was first married, bringing some extra income in by stringing for the, a couple of the bigger newspapers here in Southern California, taking wildlife photography.
Yeah.
And back in the day, it was like hunting, try to figure out where they were. Well, today, people take classes and go, oh, if we take deer urine and we put it here, that will attract the does and the bucks here, so we can get pictures.
Okay, so tell me they're not using the deer urine from the East Coast where the disease is prevalent.
I wish I could say that. So what's happened is, a lot of these photographers are actually using more game cameras than hunters do, so they can figure out where the game is at. They put those pictures out, then they set their cameras up, they put the urine in. For example, I'm talking to one of the biologists, if you do that once, it's like a 1 in a million chance, because deer actually scratch and eat the dirt where the urine went in, the prions would be existing. But you do it twice. Well, there's people out there claiming, oh, I put deer urine in the same basic area, like literally 100 times. And here's the issue. Once those prions are in the ground, Joel, you have to dig up the entire area several feet deep, take all that dirt out without spilling any of it, and incinerate it to eliminate it. Anything less than that, you didn't do anything.
It's like a whole hazmat thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's an issue of where we need to get the word out to both sides of the house, consumptive and non-consumptive. On the consumptive side, we've been having check stations. We've been going through a lot of training, a lot of education, a lot of identifying where this is, so we're not the ones doing it. And the odds of it being a hunter moving those are minuscule, less than a percentage of 1%. But on the non-consumptive side, that is becoming the bigger threat. And so this is one of those times where our community is going to be trying to figure out how to assist the department in reaching out to the non-consumptive user and saying, hey, things
you might want to stop doing that.
Right.
Okay, so you mentioned cameras. I'm an old guy, and so I used to use this. I have 2 of these. This is a Nikon F2. It's a professional 35 millimeter camera. I have big lenses for this, and I used to shoot sports with these.
Yep. I had an
so there you go. So this was one of my sports cameras. I had an auto winder for it, and crank through film like crazy. And the reason why I had 2 is because I had an assistant. So when I was done with one camera, I hand him the camera, he'd load it while I was shooting the next one, because you had to get the film. The football game is happening. They're not waiting. Hold on, I need to put film in my camera. It doesn't work. I had a very good friend who was a portrait for camera for guy for a long time. And so he asked me to help him shoot weddings. So for a number of years, I shot weddings on those. Okay, so I've got 2 rollies like this. These things, I guess, are pretty expensive now. It's a medium format camera. And for years with this and a couple of Metz flashes and a few other things, I shot weddings all the time. And so I still do a lot of photography, typically film photography, and fortunately my daughter is my photography buddy. But the interesting thing about all that, and the reason why I'm confessing my photography history and present photography work, is while I hunt, I do not do wildlife photography, so it wasn't me. It was never me. It wouldn't be me. I didn't do it. I just want I want the GunGuy TV viewership to know that Rick was not talking about me.
Oh.
The only urine I've been spreading around does not belong to deer when we're out in the wildlife, just so that you know. I'm not going to tell you who it belongs to, but it didn't belong to deer. And so there you go. There's no disease I'm spreading anywhere. Well, this is a shame. So is there a way to reach out to these folks, the non-consumptive folks, and help them understand what they're doing?
It's just our people, and maybe this is the vector that we use to open up those conversations. Say, hey, did you know about this disease? Please don't do these things. And then they say, well, why are you so concerned? Oh, because I happen to be a Second Amendment supporter. This, I think, will help people realize that we're trying to do what we've always said, and that's be really good conservationists, trying to make sure wildlife's around for the next generation to see and when it comes after that. And also trying to be good stewards of the land that we've been given and we're so fortunate to have. And a lot of that comes down to California's plagued with several other diseases. We have a rabbit hemorrhagic fever. A lot of people are like, what is that? It's like Ebola for bunnies. We have the same thing in the deer population. We have a hoof disease that's rotting elk hooves. And all these things are things that we've got to fight and try to preserve wildlife. And California is getting beat up pretty good with these things. So we're trying to keep CWD at bay as long as possible. But all these are going to have impacts on our community and the greater community as we move down the road. And so
I think I want to make this point. I wasn't gonna, but you brought something up, and I want your help in making this point because I think it needs to be made. People think that hunters don't care about the environment, and I think it's because they watched Bambi as a kid, and they saw the hunter start a fire and burn the forest down and kill the deer and like that. That is complete and utter nonsense. Hunters are, without a doubt, the strongest proponents of wildlife conservation and conserving the environment walking around.
You know, the comment that I would make, and so I was looking for right now, was one of the things that Brown said when he signed out AB 711 several years back that banned lead ammunition in the state, was he set a table that I think we forget. Hunters are the original conservationists, and that since the 1930s, hunters and anglers have done more to save California's wildlife and California's natural resources than any of the other groups combined. But I mean, especially when you think about who said that and the viewpoint that, you know, Brown was fairly left-leaning in his policies and politics and had a lot of support from the anti-gun, anti-hunting community when he made that statement of like, look, this is a fact. These are the people that are paying for it. He even went on later on and said, if hunters left the state of California and fishermen, we would lose half of our state parks within a year because they do the funding for it. And that's one of the things that as a hunter and as somebody that leads the conservation organizations in this state, that is a pet peeve of all of ours, is that people look at us as being the, you know, dorky Elmer Fudd type people that don't know what we're doing, just out hunting rabbits. When we are the people providing water for wildlife during droughts, we're the people that are out there planting food after fires so that the wildlife have it. We're the ones trying to manage the land to give access to non-consumptive users to go out there. We're the ones that are actually not myopically focused on a specific species to save, but are looking at the entire ecosystem together of how to do it because we understand. We're the ones that when we go out in the wilderness and see something wrong, we're interfacing with the biologist and the Fish and Wildlife Department to say, you have an issue in this sector with these things. Or, hey, I just caught on camera cougars doing unlike cougar behavior. So that these things can be addressed. One of the most famous things I could think of was about 5 years ago, up in the coastal foothills in Northern California, hunters started calling into the Department of Fish and Wildlife and said, hey, check this out, at 6,500 elevation, we're seeing packs of 30 wild boars, pigs, moving through and chasing deer. Of course, everybody laughed because like pigs don't go up to 6,500 feet. And so
I didn't think so until you just said this. I was like, what?
And then, the department flew over a plane, and sure enough, it's not an epidemic that pigs are hanging out that level, but there was a group of pigs that were migrating from one area of the state to another area and had crossed a pass.
Who knew?
Right, who knew? There was another time where one of those planes went over and said, oh, it's another group of pigs, and found out, no, it was 7 bears working together because the bear population exploded. And so they were doing very unlike bear behavior. These are all things that we need to be able to monitor to respond to say, because hunting is a tool to bring populations under control. And one of the things that people forget, it's a term I use all the time in defending our way of life, is every piece of environment. So just take the state of California and bears, for example. California has a carrying capacity, which means what it can manage as a state, not the people, the land itself, can manage about 23,000 bears. We're at 47,000 bears.
Yeah, that's a problem. Well, and that's the problem. I mean, we're not allowing the Fish and Game Department to set take limits for some of these animals so that we can manage the population. And that's precisely, in case you've never hunted, that's what happens, is there's a certain limit on certain things. Sometimes it's a tag that you get. And if you're in a lottery to get a doe tag or a deer tag or whatever. Sometimes it's a limit on the number of animals you can take. For example, to make it simple, you're going to go dove hunting, and maybe there's a limit of 10 doves of a certain species. You can have 10 mornings and you can't have any white wings, or you can have 10 mornings and you can have 6 Eurasians or whatever. And then when you go to renew your license, they ask you, did you hunt last year? Did you take any of these? How many did you get? What was the species? And what they're doing is they're trying to keep track of the population so that it doesn't wane to the point where the animal is threatened, but also so that it doesn't grow to the point that the environment will not support it. It's used by wildlife management people. Again, I was a forestry student, so I dealt with a lot of this. It's used by wildlife management people to manage the wildlife so that the wildlife have sufficient habitat and they don't starve, or so that we don't eradicate them and they don't become extinct.
Yeah.
And I know this show has gone very long, but I suspect that you're right. Probably 2/3 of my viewership do not hunt, and they don't know this, so I think it was an important conversation to have.
So yeah, it's going to be very trying next couple of years as we deal with these issues, along with all the normal issues that CRPA and these other organizations deal with. And so lot coming down the pipe here in the next couple of months. And so, when you'll have me on, I will be more than happy to update you.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be very, very busy. There's not going to be a big break like I was hoping to get a break.
No, I didn't think so. However, we are in better shape than New York because you fought back that one bill, and New York wasn't able to do it, and they ended up living under it for a while they're fighting it in court. So we're ahead of them a little bit.
Yep.
I'm grateful. We're finally not being accused of having the worst carry laws.
Yes.
Somebody else has got that terrible title that we really don't want. Rick, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. Have a great week.
You too.
All righty. Bye-bye. Thank you very much again for watching the entire video. I know it was super long, but we really wanted to get that hunting stuff in because I think it's important that people understand that you still can hunt in California and that there are some issues going on. So we'll talk more about hunting probably on the channel in the future. We're also going to do some hunting trips and get back to shooting again, which is a very good thing now that things are getting back to, sort of semi-normal. In the meantime, thank you very much for everything you do. If you'd like to support me on GunGuyTV Crew, I urge you to do that. You can do that on both Patreon and Locals. I prefer the Locals thing for many reasons. One, they support our Second Amendment, but you can do it on Patreon as well. In any case, you will find links in the description, or you can just go to GunGuyTVCrew.com. Have a great week. Thank you very much for all of your support again. And wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.